Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Well, if you were paying attention to the news last night, or you actually are more in the political spaces, thank you for actually paying attention to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, because we're kind of on that political space, but I focus mostly on the 2A and the issues around the 2A. Now, Trump had 74 million views as of the last time I saw it, with his interview with Tucker Carlson, and that should give you enough of an idea of who's going to win that side of the political debate if you're, in the Republican circles. What the other thing was going on was the undercard for the presidential debates. I would say the undercard for the eventual presidential debate, where you saw Vivek Ramaswamy, Governor Chris Christie, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Scott Ryan, and a bunch of other people that we just don't even care about, and I'm not even sure how they even got on the debate stage. Oh, Ron DeSantis. Now, what's interesting about this is I kind of muscled through some of the debate, but what was more interesting was what I found earlier in the day. So Colion Noir released a video on his YouTube channel, which I think is worth watching, and it's with him and Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, I am of the volition that I know that politically, no one except for Trump's probably going to pull the candidacy for the Republican Party. I don't think Vivek could actually win. I wish he had a better chance, especially after watching that video with Colion Noir. Thank you guys for tuning in to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union, first of all, because I do kind of lean on the political side that are for the issues that are related to the 2A. Specifically, a lot of them have to become political, even though we don't want them to be, but they end up being political toys or pawns for the candidates that we're talking about. And Vivek, on Colion Noir's interview, was very succinct about how he sees the 2A. And for a politician, he's ringing all the bells I want to hear. First and foremost, he mentions that the problem we have with the mass shootings that we've seen in the United States has to do with mental health. And he brings up a conversation that I bring up all the time on New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union about it's time for us to start taking people out of society because they're mentally unstable. That's a conversation that needs to happen and hasn't happened for a long time, because we see these issues time and time again with these mentally unstable people doing stupid things like throwing themselves in the middle of the street, them going out and, dressing like females when they're clearly males. You're seeing many shooters. Well, there's not as many as they like to say, but it seems to be an issue that's highlighted time and time again. There was another one tonight in Pennsylvania, I believe, where another nutcase fired lots of rounds, and I think this was over a dog, and they ended up killing the guy. Anyway, long story short, what Vivek says is there's a couple issues that he cued in on that I'm kind of a huge fan of. Number one was the whole thing about taking mentally ill people and actually addressing the problem. This is something that Colion Noir has spoken about ad infinitum. It's something we all know about in the 2A. He even mentioned, Vivek even mentioned fully automatic weapons and that they should be allowed, because that was the spirit and the intent of the First Amendment, or not the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. Now, Vivek also said that he's very much in favor of the First Amendment and the Constitution at large. But he continued on. And one of the things he brought up, which is kind of interesting that I didn't know 100%, I had the stinking suspicion it was a thing, but if you took 25% of the federal Department of Education budget, you would be able to pay for 3 armed guards at every school in the United States. Now, that sounds fantastical, but it doesn't sound out of the realm of possible. And why I say that is because Vivek is very much into numbers, very much a businessman. That means he's looked at the budget of what they've had to come up with the statistic. Now, that would take care of the one issue we're all worried about, or at least us in the 2A community are school shootings. Our kids are our most precious thing we have, which leads me to why the hell are you sending them to public schools nowadays? But more so, and I say that because the public schools seem to be sliding in the wrong direction. And I think that has a lot to do with people becoming disengaged and just trying to carry on what they have to do life. And a lot of times that means putting your kids in, an institution that isn't necessarily looking out for their best interests and kind of sees them only as dollar signs. I can say that because I worked for K-12. Now, I do see a lot of good that K-12s can do, but there needs to be a lot of reform, and it's going to take a lot more parent involvement than what I'm seeing happening. But I digress. What I'm getting at is we're all terrified, or at least I am, of school shootings. I think it's something that we've seen as a rise with the mental health issues that are coming into the world. They're soft targets, and having 3 armed guards in a school would be amazing, because that sends a very clear message that if you come to one of these places, you're going to be dealt with by an armed person. You're going to run into an armed person. Now, the other things that I think were kind of interesting about that is just, there was a lot of talk about what Vivek and Colion talked about, is they're not, Colion's not an overly political person. He opens his show up for interviews to anyone on the political spectrum so that you can actually have a debate. But something else that Vivek brought up was actually ingraining something that teaches people about the 2A and teaches you how to use guns. There used to have this thing called gun safety, in the 50s and 60s, and then it fell out of favor. Why isn't that still a thing? Because, that would be a really good way to maybe stop some of these accidental killings that happen. That's what I've done with my kids. But it also starts getting people to start realizing their rights. Something that Vivek says that I'm actually a big fan of is that anyone who graduates and wants to vote at the age of 18, they have to take the same test that an immigrant, a legal immigrant, comes to the United States has to take, because it shows that you have some sort of civics mind. In addition to that, he was talking about possibly doing service. So this is kind of service guarantees citizenship, which I don't know that I agree with, but maybe we're at that point in our society that we need some of that buy-in. You need some skin in the game to be part of the culture that you're getting into. You need to understand that your rights are there for a reason, and they need to be ingrained in you. And this is the only place I actually see that it could work, is in the school system. There is a very thin civics requirement nowadays. It's usually focused on math and reading, which is it should be. But civics and history should be just as focal point, in my opinion, because it focuses those young minds and shapes them. And you can call it indoctrination or whatever. But I think this type of indoctrination goes to the root of the problem with the country we're seeing. We're seeing the rise in that selfishness and lack of civic duty, that we're seeing the decline of our country, And I think that one solution is not the best solution, but it is a solution that could actually work. And I'm encouraging you strongly, go check out Colion Noir first off, because he's a huge 2A advocate. He's also smooth as hell. I don't know his politics. I think he would have to lean right. He wears a Let's Go Brandon shirt, so that kind of tells me some of his politics. But at the same time, you have to understand the reason why he isn't trying to be political is he tells you all the time, guns aren't political. They shouldn't be. This shouldn't be a political issue because it's your right, and that right should always be guaranteed. And the discussion he has with Vivek is very informative as far as the candidates that aren't Trump. You know, my issues with Trump are he's the one that opened the back door for all the crap we're fighting right now. And he didn't do anything for freedom while he was in office. So to give him another shot, I'm halfway to saying yes, and the halfway is because I think he's going to be looking for vengeance. And maybe he will fire a lot of these people that are in that deep state, you know, that administrative state that have been there too long and need to go away. I'm all for that because you cannot look at what's happening with the weaponization of the Department of Justice. You can't look at what's happening with the weaponization of the ATF and the FBI without thinking that that's eventually going to be turned on you. You know, the end of my statusism happened with COVID, and they're looking at trying to bring all that crap back. You know, they're already colleges and institutions that are demanding masks come back right now. I would say don't comply. The minute we comply, you have every right now to know that compliance is not the way to go. We have seen after the last 3 years of bull crap that has happened to all of us because of COVID, the shutting down of our country, the lack of human death and suffering that was caused by actual COVID, but was caused by the repercussions of shutting down, that we need to say no. You know, we need to be very vocal about it. And they've already seen that they could do it once. Let's not let them do that again. And that led to the discussion with Vivek. Vivek literally says that he wants a return of the rebellious American. You know, the American that started the American Revolution. He's not calling for violence. He's talking about the spirit there. And that's what I think a lot of Americans are lacking now. That willingness to go forward and say, no, that's not how we do things in our country. Specifically, we've been coddled too long and too comfortable, and we're not willing to get uncomfortable. We're not willing to walk away from jobs like I did eventually, because they keep the lights on. You know, as I'm looking for work, I can say I understand fully why you may have complied just to keep your job. I understand that more than ever. But I also know that there's got to be a part of you that says, no, enough's enough. You're seeing them come after FFLs. You're seeing them coming after Trump. You're seeing them come after anyone in the 2A or anyone who doesn't agree with them. Now's the time where we need to be rebellious. We do that by peacefully non-complying. That means when they start pushing the masks, because they're going to do it, we say no. When they say stay home, we say no. If your job wants you to stay home and you can work from home, fine. But after you're done with your shift from working from home, go do everything you normally would. And why I say that is it'll set that in motion. Do not let them do what they did for the 2020 election in 2024, because they're already gearing up, and you can see that when they start calling for masks mandates and that they're boosting up this new variant of COVID to try to get people afraid again. And there's one side that is terrified of COVID. There's another side that we dealt with it and we realize it's not that bad. And all those anarchists like myself know that compliance isn't going to get you there. Simply making them irrelevant by not doing it is. Because then they have to adjust fire. Don't let them do mail-in ballots by mass. You know, there's something to be said about absentee ballotism. And when you do that, you have to request a ballot. Then they ask you if you requested a ballot. Then they send you a ballot. That's two different ways that they've verified that they are sending it to the correct address. Don't let them just send ballots to everyone who's on the voter rolls, because that's where you start seeing crooked things happen. And to think that we have a candidate who is actually very, very eloquent, who is very focused on preserving rights, and he is on the undercard and not the lead, makes me worry, because Trump had his chance. He had 4 years to do his thing, and he didn't do crap. You know, we had the best economy under Trump. I'm going to give him props where it's due. We had the best economy we've ever seen under President Trump. But we also had $7 billion or $7 trillion increase in our national spending. So while all you guys that are always on board with Trump, that's fine. I understand where you're going. I understand what you're doing. But if you're going to advocate for someone to be his VP, maybe it should be Vivek Ramaswamy. Like, share, subscribe. Be great.
In the top, I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that I ain't catching all slack, and I have been in